Jim Campbell, it's a great pleasure to welcome you here to the Rosslare podcast. Jim hails from County Wexford and has been working for well over 20 years as a photojournalist, photographer and activist. Jim, tell me about your early days in Wexford.
Early days in Wexford, I was born in Waterford, and I lived in Wexford then all my life. And I went to school in the Mercy School in Summerhill, and I went to CBS Primary School and a CBS Secondary School. I dabbled in photography for a long time, and I heard this story about Albert Reynolds coming down to Owlard to open up the GA pitch there. Albert at the time was the Taoiseach. And I went up anyway, and the place was full of people, as you can imagine, and a lot of photographers there. And I was trying to get a good sight of where I get a picture of this helicopter landing on the pitch. And I stood by the gate, as I got out on the gate, and I said to the guy, "Can I go out on the pitch?" He said, "No, you can't go out on the pitch." And next thing anyway, this photographer arrived with a camera over his shoulder, and he introduced himself to the guard as an independent photographer from Dublin. And the guard opened the gate, and I went with him. The guy put his hand up and tried to stop me. I said, "No, I'm with him. This is his bag." I got on the pitch, and there was only two of us on the pitch. And I looked back at all these people. I said, "What am I after doing now? I'm have to get myself in a lot of trouble here." So next thing the helicopter landed anyway, and Albert got out, and he stood by the helicopter, and the man took his few photographs, and he was finished, and Albert still stood there waiting for me to take my picture. As you can imagine, I was kind of, I'm going to take pictures. So I took a few pictures of Albert standing by the helicopter. And that was kind of the start where I said, this is what I want, this is the life I want, this is what I want to be doing. So I was later on that night anyway, Albert's PR came over to me, and he said, "Are you a local photographer?" "I am, yeah." See, the other chap had to go home. He says, "Can you take photographs of Albert in the houses now? It'll be only you and a couple of other people." I said, "No problem." So I spent the night with Albert and taking pictures in different people's houses of Albert visiting Owlard. So I came home around 11:30. This is what I want. The rest is history after that. Then I went to college in Dublin in 1995, DIT Kevin Street. I done 3 years in Dublin, and travelled up and down from Wexford. I stayed in Arklow for a part of it, and I graduated in 1998, and then went in straight in them almost within 6 months. I was working for a local paper in Wexford. Here I am now 20 years later, still taking photographs. So
I just want to ask you, is it true you had a family, like 2 or 3 generations doing photography?
My grandfather was a sergeant in the Gardaí, and he done photography, he done his own darkroom and all, and he done photography all his life. And then when he retired, he became one of the founding members of Wexford Camera Club. And then my dad died 4 years ago, and up to his death, he took landscape photographs, and they all can be seen on Facebook as well. And his name was Campbell, and he took a lot of landscapes on Kilmore, The Hook, County Clare, all around the country. He took landscape photographs. Then I went on then to the press work and the PR work, and that was what I was doing, you know.
Can you explain the difference between being a photographer and being a photojournalist? Well, I class two of them as the same thing, you know. I went to see my hero, Don McCullum, there a few years ago in Carlow. I met Don, and he made an interesting point that he don't call himself a photojournalist. Now, this man has spent 50 years going around the world. He done Northern Ireland, he done Iraq, he done all the war zones all around the world. Actually, Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister at the time, stopped him from going to the Falklands because he was such an honest photographer. She didn't want him there. And when I asked him this, we're talking about photography to Don, and he was saying that he don't call himself as a photojournalist, he calls himself as a photographer. But basically, really, every picture should tell a story. And you don't need, a photographer picture, if the picture is right, it should tell the story. I shouldn't need a story to go with it, you know. But the problem you well know is that a photograph can be set up, can be, fictionalized, made up.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But at the end of the day, the photographers out there to show honestly what they see. Yes, unfortunately, there have been a few that were changed or set up where we put it. But to be fair, I think the most of photographers out there to do an honest, don't go with some liars to set pictures up.
Do you believe then that
that most journalists try and give an honest account. Is there a sort of an ingrained honesty about the profession?
I think there is a lot of honesty in the profession. I think a lot of good work with the profession. I think without the profession, I don't think we'll know exactly what's going on in the world, you know. Many photographers have been killed trying to get the right picture to show the world what's happening, you know. I mean, like, to be fair to them, like, most of them go out and do a very good job and an honest job.
Right, let's get on to your travels abroad. I believe your first trip was to Israel, where you were taking photographs over there. Is that correct?
Yeah, 2013 I decided to go to Israel. And my plan was to do the daily life of the Israelis and the Palestinians and put them together on a country divided, basically. I applied to the Israel embassy, and they wouldn't give me the visa, so I went over anywhere, and they weren't happy with that, and I went into Israel. They let me in, but it wasn't everywhere I went. The Palestinians contacted me and said, you know, I didn't go to them. So I went as a second trip then to get to Palestine, which I succeeded in doing with the help of the Palestinians. And I was able to portray the life of the Israeli people and the Palestinian people, and put it together as a project to show the world, like, you know, that the difference between the two ways of life.
After Israel, you went to Ukraine, is that correct?
That's right, yeah. Ukraine was probably the most difficult place, I think, most dangerous place, in my opinion, that I've been to. Mainly because, I tried to get into Ukraine, and the part of Donetsk I wanted to get into, I couldn't go to Ukraine because they wouldn't let you into Donetsk. So my only option was to go into Moscow, and I applied for a Moscow visa, which I got. And I headed over in 2015 then to Moscow on my own, and I was supposed to meet a guy over in Red Square, and he was going to put me on the bus to Ukraine. And when I come back from Ukraine, then he picked me back up and bring me back to the airport. And I met this guy in Red Square, and he brought me into the bus. The bus going about 6 or 7 hours later. He put me on the bus, and he said, I wish you luck with this one. And I got on the bus, and the bus journey then was about 19 hours from Moscow to Ukraine.
How in God's name would you trust somebody to meet you at the airport? How did you know it wasn't KGB, or what gave you the confidence to believe this was okay?
Well, no matter where you go, you do your homework first, you do your research, you find out who the people are. And, you learn that this is the guy, this is the person that's I'm going to put my life in his hands, you know. And you have to trust that guy. You got to trust him, because if you have any doubts at all, you shouldn't go. But I know, I done a lot of research, and I had a friend in Wexford who put me in touch with this guy, and it was so hard that I said, no, this guy is good. And he was brilliant. He was actually he was actually quite worried about me when I was in Ukraine, because when I arrived back into Moscow, he was so delighted that he had a driver, and two of us sat in the back of the car with bottles of beer, celebrate and get back into Moscow. But going back to why I think Ukraine is probably the most dangerous place, because the soldiers are there. There's no kind of seniority there as such, you know. I mean, like, they're going on with bandanas in their heads and all that. At one stage I had a gun put to my head, and who are you, where are you from, and all this. And the family that put me up for 10 days were very nervous. And what they done was, each day, we had meetings each day to find out what we're going to do the next day. And you know by them, they're very nervous to get caught, because if I had to get caught, they would have been shot. And even my translator at the time, when I came back after 10 months, I learned that he had been shot by the Ukrainian soldiers on his way to work. When I was over there with him, he told me that he feared for his life. He had to travel across the border, the man-made border from Donetsk into Ukraine to go to work. And every day he hassled by the soldiers, and, you know, different things happened. And he told me that what happens is people disappear and never heard of again. And about 10 months after coming home, I was contacted by a friend of the family that said he disappeared, never seen again, and they found his car burnt out.
Did they ever find the body?
No.
Why would he do something like that? Is he doing it for money? Is he doing it because he doesn't like the government or the system?
The family were so happy for me to go over there that they were willing to help me to get the word out what was happening over there.
So it was all about the West being told about what was happening in the UK?
Yes, that's what they wanted. Let know what was happening. And that's why, you know, they put their lives in risk. Same in Syria, people put their lives in risk just to tell the story.
He subsequently went to Syria.
Syria's been back in my mind for a long time, and since the Syrian crisis started. And it was in 2015 I seen an opportunity that
Syria's come a realistic, realistic project. And I'd done a bit of research on it, and I contacted a French NGO called SOS Cretans the Orient. And when I contacted them, the man I wanted to contact was actually in Syria. And he said he couldn't talk to me, he was in Syria at the moment, but he'd be back in France in a month's time. And he said to me, ring me then in a month's time, I'll talk to you. And I said to him, so I'm going to go to Syria. I'm not going to talk to him on the phone. I want to meet him in person, face to face. He said, no problem. So he gave me a day to be home. I flew out to Paris. I went to the office and I met the man. We had a meeting there for 3 or 4 hours. We discussed Syria, and then he suggested Iraq as well.
So they were based in Iraq as well?
Based in Iraq as well, yeah.
Okay, I understand getting to Paris, but getting into Syria, how difficult was that?
Getting to Syria, well, the NGO now done a lot of organising for me, organised the flights for me. I had to fly into Lebanon, into Beirut, and then I had to travel probably the most dangerous road in the world from Beirut into Damascus. That's where a lot of people have been kidnapped. I arrived at the airport, and the Lebanese are hard enough to get through as well. When I got through the Lebanese, then this driver was waiting outside for me. He couldn't speak any English.
You got there, but this guy doesn't speak any English. How did you manage to communicate with him?
He kind of had English writing on the card, so he was able to show me and said, this is where you're going, this is, and he had one there saying, this is the most dangerous road in the world. When you come to checkpoint, if he didn't stop, there's a reason why he wouldn't stop. And that was because he feared the checkpoint was taken over by ISIS.
When you were going with him on this road, the road to Damascus, were you incognito or?
Was I sorry?
Were you dressed up? Were you trying to hide yourself?
It was night time.
You didn't worry about that?
It was night time. It was pitch dark, and one fighting experience actually happened when we got over the Syrian border. We had about an hour before I got through the Syrians because they weren't happy with my papers, and it was all sorted out by phone then with the people who put me up the safe house I was staying in. And then I got into Syria then, and we were going down the road anyway, and the driver, because he couldn't speak English, I didn't know what was going to happen. So he stopped the car, and it was pitch dark, I could see nothing. And next thing, then he turned the headlights off. I said, what's going on here? And then he put lights on inside, and then I could hear all this talk outside the car. And the next thing, my back door opened, and I was hauled out of the car at night time. The reason for the lights going off is the soldiers can see who's inside the car, how many inside the car before they approach the car. And they can see there's 2 people, driver and myself. I've done a lot of talk on the phone to the people I was staying with while I was in the car, so they were filling me in what was happening too, But I forgot to tell me about that part of it, and it kind of did start me a bit, but...
Did you fear for your life?
Yes and no. I probably fear for my life more in Ukraine than Syria and Iraq. But when you go over there, you go over there and you put your faith in your translator's hands.
Tell me about the safe house you ended up in.
Yeah, safe house was when I arrived in Damascus with this driver. He stopped in Damascus city, and another driver came and picked me up because this driver wouldn't be told where the safe house was because it was too dangerous to tell him in case he'd tell the wrong people. So I'd pick up a second driver then in Damascus, and they brought me to the safe house. The safe house was a house with where we stayed, and there was gates on it and cameras on the front gate. We could never leave alone. We always had to leave in twos. And we could never get a taxi to the safe house. We had to get a taxi within maybe a mile of it and walk back to the safe house because it was a safe house is somewhere where you're hidden.
But was it a safe house just for foreigners, or was it a safe house for militants?
Safe house for many NGO people.
And why were they under threat?
Anyone in Westerners, anyone that is helping over there in regards humanitarian or even press, they're all danger. One time, press talks go anywhere in the world and they be welcome. It's so different nowadays because you're telling a story probably they don't want to hear, they don't want to get out.
Okay, could you clarify for me the difference between the ISIS and the white helmets?
I met this journalist and he wanted to go see a journalist,
he's an Iraqi born, but he's living in Syria. And he gave me the rundown. I said, no problem. So one evening, we got a taxi pick us up, and we drove right across the Lebanon at night. And we brought him to a cafe. And inside the cafe then, there was a back room. And we brought him to the back room. And within 5 minutes after I arrived, and then the journalist arrived with 3 minders, and they just sat in different parts of the room. And I spoke to him, and he said, if you want to see something, so I show it to you. So I pick up at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, he says, and I bring you to a place where you're not supposed to be.
Do you know at the time where he was going to bring you?
No.
You didn't say
No
anything?
idea.
And you readily agreed to that?
Yeah, well, I spoke to him for an hour, and we spoke about different things, his opinion on different things, and he told me that he'd something to show me tomorrow.
Yeah, but that would sound very ominous to me. If somebody said, I'm going to show you something tomorrow,
My translator said, yeah, we're good. So he picks up at 7 in the morning anyway, and we went to, reason 7 in the morning because the soldiers, the hierarchy, the soldiers normally arrive on 10 o'clock. So we had to get in and get out before they arrive. And he met the soldier on the entrance to this area, and he had words with him. And the soldier came over and see where you were from. I said, from Ireland. And he said, that's okay. He says, you're a journalist. I looked at my translator, and he just nodded head, yeah, I'm a photojournalist. And I said, okay, he says, and see, you have an hour to get out. I said, fair enough.
So the soldier who was on duty was paid a backhander to let you into the...
Yeah, I didn't pay him, but that's the one thing.
And that's because they get so badly paid up?
That's badly paid, or some not paid at all, you know. There's soldiers in Iraq to have me paid for 6 weeks.
So, Jim, could you tell me what you found in the compound when you got there?
Well, obviously, the compound itself was destroyed. There was almost nothing left of it, just the walls standing up. And when we walked inside the different rooms, we walked on different medication and morphine on the ground and medical equipment and stuff like that, you know. And then in some rooms, then we found Islamic State writing on the walls. And it was translated into join the Islamic State and stuff like that. But that was also joined on to the Free Syrian Army. It was all one building. So half was the Free Syrian Army, and the other half was the White Helmets. But the whole building was completely destroyed. But the medication, there was definitely went to thousands of dollars worth of medication on the ground.
I'm just going to ask you about Iraq.
I was in Iraq first.
And you went to the refugee camps in Baghdad?
Yes, I did, yes. This is the first time I was over there. I was over there on 2 occasions. I was over there on Christmas 2016. I was over there a week in December. And I went back then for 3 months then in 2017. Went over in March and came back in June in 2017. And it was during 2016 visit that I stayed in Erbil, northern Iraq. And we flew from Erbil down to Baghdad. We were picked up at the airport in Baghdad and brought to the bishop's house where we stayed. We had to go to a checkpoint, and the driver said to us, you know, there was hundreds of cars at checkpoint going through together, and said, you know, any of these cars could go off for the car bomb. And see soldiers checking the boots of the cars and all, and they kind of sitting there waiting to see what's happening. So about an hour they were getting through that, and then we go out to the bishop's house then in Baghdad, and we stayed there overnight, and next morning then I went to a refugee camp in Baghdad which housed 1,300 families.
What were the conditions like in the camps?
Horrible. The smell of sewage, the smell, and you walk into the horrible, overcrowded, doing little prefabs, and families took on prefabs. And when I arrived there, people came out to meet me because they knew I was a photographer. And it was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. The smell was absolutely...
So the majority of the people in the refugee camp were from where?
From Mosul and the towns around Mosul that were taken over by ISIS.
And was there a genuine fear in the people's faces, or
desperation?
There was,
yeah. The fear of no future, fear of you know... I think some were glad they had got out because ISIS had taken over Mosul so quick that some of their families didn't make it out, you know. And, there was definitely fear, and they were frightened and didn't know where the future was going to... There's 1,300 families in this refugee camp, and it was just, just horrible conditions.
I read recently that the Iraqi government has decided last October to close those camps. They did say that they were going to come up with a new initiative to provide shelter for the tens of thousands of dislocated people.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Iraq has always been in trouble, like, and I can see never come to peace in Iraq.
I also read that the truth seems to be quite different from what they were saying, that thousands of families have been sent to live in seriously damaged homes, abandoned areas where there's unexploded bombs, corpses and rubble. And a series of clashes have arisen between the host community and the people who are in.
Yeah, that sounds right, yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like there's no...
I don't think there'll be any hope for Iraq fans. I think Iraq will always have trouble there, you know.
I'm going to get to a softer subject, photography, right?
Yeah.
You've had an exhibition entitled Journey into the Unknown and have spoken about your war photography. You have even had an exhibition in the London Institute of Photography. That must have been very satisfying.
Yeah, that was. I was in London there for a year and a half. People I won't say enjoyed it, but found it very interesting. And the feedback was quite good from it, you know. But the first one I had was in the Riverbank House in Wexford, and over 400 people attended. And that was in June 2017. As a guest speaker, I had the CEO of the NGO that was where he came over from France for it, and he spoke at it, you know. I was opened by the mayor of Wexford, Jim Moore. So you know, that was a good start to it, like, and I had a wonderful sense of being at Rome with it, and then in London then as well.
If money was no object, what dream camera kit would you buy for you?
Well, camera equipment all depends on what job you want to do. Obviously, you know, the Hasselblad would be my favourite. I love a Hasselblad. But for war photography, you know, the smaller the equipment, the better, because I'm a big fan of a Leica. If I had money tomorrow, I'd buy a Leica camera. This is good because the world we live in now, pictures need to be done fast and get to A to B fast, you know. As soon as you put the pictures on the computer, you have to get them off.
Because of the huge uptake in smartphones with cameras of up to 108 megapixels, the chances of capturing a unique photograph have been hugely diminished. Has the technology impacted on your business?
It has. It wouldn't have in the conflict areas because not many people want to go to these areas, you know. But in regards to everyday life photography, it has, you know, because nowadays, you know, weddings and all, like, you know, they're taking pictures of phones, or Uncle John is taking pictures of the camera, you know, camera equipment, even phones are gone so good these days that you can take pictures. But then you have the other side of it, the professional photographer. It's always good to get professional photographer. Simple reason being is, if the feet are cut off somebody or the head is cut off somebody, that's not the camera phone. That's the person taking the picture.
Funny, I was going to ask you about that. Do you think wedding photography for photographers will ever come back to the same level it was prior to the COVID?
It's hard to know because photographers might find a different way of approaching weddings and doing weddings, and maybe doing a bit more artistic to weddings that the person with the phone can't do. Do you know what I mean? So I'd never said never, you know. There is a down in photographers doing weddings, all right. But no, I still think that it could make a living from wedding photography. It depends on how artistic the photographer could be and the kind of pictures he can take, you know.
Are you a purist or a Photoshop man?
No, I'm not a Photoshop man. Far from it, I'm a purist. My great saying is, a few minutes longer taking a picture saves hours on a computer.
It's a good way of thinking of things.
That's the truth, you know.
Do you have any projects planned for the future?
Yes, hopefully when the COVID-19 starts to improve, I hope to travel to a couple of conflict areas of mine. You know, Ethiopia at the moment is breaking, and trying to work out how we get over there. And also I'm hoping to go to Afghanistan. And I'm working on that at the moment, see what contacts I can get over there to go over to Afghanistan. And there's a couple of more conflict areas that I haven't actually, I have names, but I haven't actually worked on them yet, so I'm working on them as well. So I'm hoping 2021 now will be a year that I will get back into the travelling after the COVID-19. And also I have 2 books in progress. One is to cover all the war photographs I've taken, and the ones I will take over the next couple of years.
And then the next one is I'm doing a project on Wexford, my hometown Wexford, where I'll be photographing people in Wexford, and that will hopefully be out, I'm hoping that March 22.
So you're talking coffee table books?
Yes, coffee table books, yeah. I'm working with a very good editor, Michael Freeman from Three Sisters Press, and we had a lot of meetings and discussions about it, and all going well.
Have you ever feared of being killed trying to do your job?
No. The answer to that, you know, if you're nervous or scared, you shouldn't go over there, because the chances are you will get killed if you're scared. I don't fear death. No, it's just, I'm confident what I do. I'm with the right people. You can't think that way. You have to think positive.
But in terms of your work, when you're talking about going to Ethiopia and places like that, how can you afford that?
Yeah, next year I'm looking for sponsorship. So if anyone wants to sponsor my work, we can sit down and talk about what way I can benefit them as well, you know.
And what sort of value do you think your work does as a photojournalist or a war correspondent?
I think there's two answers to that. The first answer is, you know, I felt over in Ukraine now that they were very happy to have me over there because I was telling their story and bringing their story out. And that's very important, because people need to know that, you know, thank God my story is getting out, you know. And the second thing is the people reading the story, you know, if you can touch them people and let them see what's happening from your eyes over there. And that's the two. If one can join the other, then we have something here. And like if I can touch the heart of one person with my work, that's my work done.
Jim, thank you very, very much for that. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Keep listening to TRP.